Hello, everybody. I'm Jillian Sakovits. A very warm welcome to Full Time. It is presented by Amazon Prime. Coming up on today's show, we are going to get you all set for the English Women's Super League. The season is almost back. It begins on Friday, so we're going to head over across the pond to get you all caught up on everything you need to know. I'm going to be joined by the brilliant trio from The Athletic in Megan Feringa, Cerys Jones, and as always, Tamerra Griffin, to discover if anyone can catch the reigning champions Chelsea after what was a nearly perfect season of winning it all except for the Champions League. That was Arsenal, who will look to turn European glory into domestic success this season. And also, can the Washington Spirit owner, Michele Kang, now the owner also of the London City Lionesses, disrupt the WSL? And lastly, who are the exciting new faces to watch? Let's get into it. Okay, time now to introduce the stellar panel that we have lined up for you today. Megan Feringa, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Where are you joining us from?
The lovely sunny Liverpool.
Quite lovely, quite lovely. And Tamerra Griffin coming to us from Northern California?
Yes, you got it. I'm staying put for the foreseeable future, i.e. maybe the next 5 days.
And lastly, we have Cerys Jones, who is on site in the offices.
I am. I'm in London.
London. Quite lovely. I'm coming to us from Connecticut in the United States of America. Let's talk about this WSL season kicking off on September 5th. Megan, we'll start with you. What are you most excited about when you think about this season as a whole?
I think for me, it's the level of competition that we're going to see. You can look at the top three and we'll get into it. And obviously there's sort of quite a big gap between the top and the rest of the league. But in terms of the rest of the league being competitive with each other, I think this is probably one of the first times that we don't necessarily know who is going to be the relegated team. There's a change of format in terms of how relegation is going to work as well, which is quite exciting, introducing a playoff system, which has really never been done before, over here at least. So there's a lot of things to be excited for because there's quite a lot of newness, and it feels like we are having this newness coincide with incredible investment across the board for a lot of these clubs. So it's the first time that we've seen this level of care, but also this level of scrutiny. So I think you're going to have quite a lot of drama this season, which is exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing that I'm most excited about, if I had to sum it up in one word, is scale. I'm very curious how much bigger the WSL can get this season. I know that there were mixed reviews on the new brand of the league itself. I have a penchant for bright colors, so I'm all for it. But I'm looking forward to the WSL taking up more space in both the discourse of women's soccer globally and certainly across England as well, in the UK. I think the fact that England are now twice consecutive European champions, which I know we'll get to, is going to have a huge effect on the visibility of the league. I mean, I know all of us have been sweating from the summer transfer window. So the new faces that are coming into the league or new faces appearing on familiar teams within the WSL, I think is going to add to the intrigue. And I just hope that all of the investments, like you pointed out, Megan, that have been made into this game are on display, not only on the field, but in terms of the teams, the infrastructure, and how much bigger they can get.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting, and I hope that the WSL can kind of capitalise on the Euros. I think we've seen a lot of the narrative around women's football usually is that, you know, people come and to watch, for instance, after this tournament, they might come to watch the Lionesses. They'll come to Chelsea to see Hannah Hampton, to Man United to see Ella Toone, or Arsenal to see Alessia Russo. And I think my hope for this season is that, great, we can get that initial kind of boost off that. But then, as Megan and Tamerra have said, hopefully the league is going to be so competitive and it's going to be such an interesting season. My hope is that people kind of come for the players and the individuals that they recognise, but they stay for the actual football and the stories of the league. So that's what I'm really hoping for and what I'm really excited for.
And add to all that, Tamerra, you kind of touched on it, the fact that from an American lens, there's more American players now being linked with the WSL adds a heightened sense, I think, of interest, at least here from the other side of the pond. Moving on now, I want to dive a little bit more into Euro 2025. With England winning its second title in the way that they did, really I think, capturing the hearts of so many fans and casual fans that were just kind of tuning into the tournament, of watching them time after time kind of be this like heart attack team that kept you on the edge of your seat. It was so fun to watch, no matter who you were, that I know casual fans who had no vested interest found themselves at the end of that tournament really rooting for England. How much of an effect, Megan, do you think that will have on the WSL this season?
I think it'll be huge. You know, when they won their first Euros a couple of years ago, the influx of fans that you would see at games was massive, and it also kind of started to shape the way that clubs would strategize in terms of transfers. You know, to get a Lioness was everything. You wanted to capitalize on that, and a lot of times branding, marketing, it would be based on a Lioness. If you go to London, North London, South London, in the next coming days, you'll see Lucy Bronzes everywhere, kind of near Chelsea. That's a big deal, but it's because, you know, she's a Lioness, she's recognizable, and that's how it works. So I think you'll see a lot more of that marketability of Lionesses. The thing is, though, is that the Lionesses have already won a Euros. They've now sort of retained that title. So I don't think we're going to see the sort of like the 500% jump in attendances that we saw the first time around. But even if we see like a steady increase at the lower levels, that's where you know that this is success. Because it's easy to look at Arsenal and go, you know, the ecosystem's really great. We need to be looking and saying like Everton now at Goodison Park. Cool. Are they getting 3, 4, 5,000 people there every single week? And I think if we see that, we can constitute this as a successful sort of translation from the Euro 2025 victory to the domestic game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think it's going to be as extreme as it was in 2022 because, I mean, that was England as a whole's first senior major tournament in decades, right? So that was a massive...
And it was in England.
And it was in England as well, is a really good point. So it was a massive deal, whereas this year it's still huge, but I don't think we're naturally not going to see quite the same influx. I think the key point is, like Megan said, like building that sustainability off the back of it now, and marketing based on the Lionesses is great, but it's then how do we keep it sustainable off the back of that so we keep people coming back season after season, not just the season after a major tournament.
Tamerra, what do you see that bump being stateside?
That's a good question. I mean, because there was so much visibility of the Euros this summer in the US, I honestly think that it's going to go beyond the Lionesses for a lot of people, because I'm thinking of players like Iman Benet, who I know, Karis, we have been so excited about since the Euros, and is now playing with Man City. For people who are really paying keen attention, the sickos, I think players like that are going to bring a little bit more visibility to the WSL, because, you know, you learn about players sometimes for the first time during these summer tournaments, and you want to follow them, of course. But I'm also thinking about players like Michele, for whom it was her first Euros and obviously made a major impact. I'm going to be really curious what that means in terms of people following her career now, whereas they might not have done that in 2022. But I do think that it's going to trickle over to the US for sure. The fact that we can even access the league, which we were able to do last season as well, but I think that's only going to grow interest. I know for me, being in California on the West Coast, this season always means waking up really early on the weekends. I don't always do the 4:30 a.m. Pacific time games, but it's nice to have that on when, you know, you're getting breakfast or just got back from like your Saturday morning run to the farmer's market or like run through the park or whatever. So I do think that people are going to start incorporating this into their lifestyle, and in similar ways that people just know in the US this time of season they're going to be plopped on the couch all day long for NFL. People are going to start doing that with women's soccer, where you start in the morning with WSL and then you just go through the day watching NWSL games.
Let's zoom in a little bit now on the season. The opening match will see the defending champions Chelsea take on Manchester City at Stamford Bridge. The league, for those of you that don't know, consists of 12 teams who will face each other twice throughout the season. One home fixture, one away fixture, and then the season will end on May 17th. So let's talk about the top of the table. The established Big Four being Chelsea, then Arsenal, Manchester United, and Man City. Defending champions Chelsea, they had a perfect season in the 2024-2025 campaign, winning the WSL, undefeated, also lifting the League Cup and the FA Cup. The last time Chelsea did not win the WSL was 2019, when Arsenal lifted their most recent title. Megan, how do you think Chelsea are shaping up after this dominant, incredible, unstoppable season under Sonia Bonpastor?
Well, before this week, because I think we should say, before this week, everyone was still like, yeah, Chelsea still have a really good chance because Chelsea have, it sounds so cliche, but they do have this mentality. They can grind out wins like no one else's business. And this has been a historic problem for Manchester City and Arsenal, especially Chelsea's depth too. Like, you'll see Arsenal and City, especially City last season, they had loads of injuries, and suddenly, you know, this incredible run they had in the beginning where you're thinking maybe City are title contenders, they fall off by Christmas. And Chelsea just have never really had that issue. Lauren James might be injured on the wing, but hey, we can call on about 2 other players that can do it. And so before this week, people still would have said, despite all of the investment that Arsenal have made, Chelsea still should be favorites because they are just so good at this winning thing. They just know how to do it. And now suddenly you've got them linked with Alyssa Thompson from Angel City. And I think that is where Chelsea's sort of champion heft, that pedigree is coming in, because they were scary enough as it was. If they can bring in Alyssa Thompson onto the wing, you are looking at a team that can kind of just say, oh, LJ's injured. LJ doesn't feel like she's up for it for the League Cup. Alyssa, you come in. Oh, Alyssa, maybe you don't want to play the full 90. Okay, LJ, you come in. And like, to have that kind of depth, I don't think any other team can flex that type of muscle. And that's where, like, if Chelsea can do this, it's fantastic. But yeah, Chelsea champions, they know how to win. And they have for the last 6 or 7 years.
Who do you see contending after Chelsea? Or does anybody disagree here with Megan?
It's hard to disagree, to be fair. I think I went to Chelsea's last pre-season game at Kings Meadow last weekend, and I spoke to Sonia Bonpastor, and this was kind of before the links to Alyssa Thompson emerged. And, you know, she was obviously asked, oh, like, there's a few days left of the transfer window. Like, what are your guys' plans? Are you planning on any additions? And she sort of went, oh, you know, I'm happy with my squad. I'm really happy with my squad. And obviously, you know, if something good comes along, kind of why not? And it's like, oh, yeah, why not? Why not sign Alyssa Thompson? Because, you know, that's the situation that they're in now. They have that kind of, that pull, and it's, like Megan says, it's quite scary. It feels weird to kind of bet against them, and I won't, but I will say that I think Arsenal coming off that Champions League win, I mean, you mentioned at the start Chelsea having a, like, quote-unquote perfect season. Domestically, they were unbeaten, but they would be the first people to tell you that it wasn't perfect because they didn't win the Champions League, and that is the real, like, monkey on their back that they are desperate to do. So I think Arsenal lifting that trophy can give them a huge boost. They've obviously brought in Olivia Smith, Taylor Hines, like, they've had a really strong window as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they compete.
I should have worn a more neutral color, but I am literally begging Arsenal to not let Chelsea do it again. For the health of the league, I need it to be somebody else. I said this in the roundtable that the 3 of us did. Yes, we know what Chelsea are capable of. Yes, they were favored to win it again even before these Alyssa Thompson questions started popping up about their future together, their possible future together. But I just can't. Maybe I'm too spoiled in the NWSL with all of the parity, knowing that no one game is guaranteed. Anybody could beat anyone. I know that is not the case in the WSL. I don't know that needs to be the case in the WSL. But if ever there was a year for Chelsea to be unseated from the top of the table, it has to be this one. For reasons that both of you have already mentioned. Arsenal coming off this major, massive Champions League win that, mind you, their season started horribly last season. And so for them to be able to turn that around, I think bonds the team in really special ways. I think Renee Schlegers, this is going to be her first full season with Arsenal. And so I'm really curious what she's going to be able to do with that. I think that she is excellent about developing younger players. So I can see Olivia Smith completely thriving there. And I do think that even if I'm wrong, and even if Chelsea end up doing Chelsea things again, I don't think that they're going to have an unbeaten season. And only because, yes, stacked roster, stacked bench, honestly, of players who would easily start at a lot of other teams. But I'm thinking about the newness of some of these relationships. For example, Sam Kerr coming back, but she and someone like Sandy Baltimore have not shared a lot of minutes together. Naomi Girma, unfortunately, picked up an injury in her debut with Chelsea last season. I think that she's probably still building that partnership with Millie Bright. Kadisha Buchanan coming back. I'm curious how that's going to look. And I don't necessarily think it's going to spell, failure for them. But I do think that as they work out these partnerships, it could make them a little bit vulnerable in Chelsea terms. And I can see teams like Arsenal, City, and United maybe taking advantage of that a couple times this season.
Which of the big four are you most concerned about?
Oh, what a question. I think it's hard not to look at Man United in this question. I think City have actually done an incredible job at recruitment this summer. We talked about Bene, an amazing player, and I'm so excited to see her thrive. Andre Yeglitz looks like a great manager that City have brought in. United are struggling, I think, to compete financially in the market like the other three are. And you can see that with the players they brought in. Yes, they brought in Rolfo, which is a fantastic acquisition, but it was ultimately on a free transfer. So there are these elements, and Mark Skinner has said it himself, they're struggling to meet valuations. They're struggling to work in an inflated market. And Chelsea and Arsenal and City have kind of been the people that are catalyzing that inflated market, and United are struggling to compete in it. So to me, they're the ones that are going to be the most difficult. They were in the Champions League qualifying stages, the second round. They sort of squeaked by 1-0, and it's still good. I'm glad they are, but they need some help investment-wise. And unfortunately, I think that goes far beyond Mark Skinner. That comes from the top.
Yeah, I think United's squad just looks a lot thinner than the rest of the kind of big four, as Megan's mentioned. I mean, I think Julia Zigiotti-Olme is a fantastic signing for their midfield, and the players that they've got on the pitch have real quality. The problem is kind of, as we've mentioned, with sort of Chelsea at the other end of the spectrum, what happens if those players, particularly with competing in the Champions League, they need that additional depth, and I'm not sure that they've added it. They've also sent a few young players on loan that potentially could have helped provide that depth at times. Obviously, loans in some situations can be recalled, but that's not something that we tend to see heaps of. So, people like Lucy Newell, Jess Simpson, Emma Watson all going out on loan is great for their development, but it is going to harm United's depth a little bit. So I am a little bit concerned about them. And I think that hopefully if they can progress past the next round in the Champions League, which will be a really difficult tie for them, that can be sort of a call for more investment in January, but that's a very tall order already.
Yeah, they are in a tricky place because on the one hand, breaking into the Champions League could spell more investment into the club, but competing in that tournament, as you mentioned, Cerys, means that you really need to have some depth to your bench while also competing in, of course, the WSL. And so it's this really unfortunate paradox that I think United are stuck in. It's, all things are possible in this game, but they've not set themselves up as we head into this season with that sort of reassurance. So United are also the point of concern for me too.
Let's move down now, the WSL table from 5 down. Give me your biggest team to watch that could make a name for themselves in this 2025-2026 season.
Let me jump in ahead of Megan because I know she's going to say the same team as me, which is Everton.
I was waiting for this moment.
I think they should be really happy with their business this summer. They're moving into Goodison Park, which for sort of our listeners on the US side who might not know, Everton men moved out of Goodison Park, which is their kind of historic home, into a new stadium. That's been a project of several years, and the club decided to keep Goodison as the home for the women's team, which is a massive sort of show of faith from the ownership and is really encouraging. So this can be a really exciting moment for them, and they've capitalised on that with some great recruitment as well, which I won't steal Megan's thunder completely and I will let her talk about, but for me, they're definitely a team to watch.
Yeah, Everton for me for sure. They just announced Ruby Mace from Leicester for a club record fee. They initially offered about $100,000 for her, which was roughly around the fee that they had spent on Hannah Benenson a few years ago, and that was a club record fee. This one is far closer to about the 200 range. And for Everton, this is great. It's their 9th signing of the summer. And you don't have to go that far back in history for manager Brian Sorensen to just sort of be bemoaning the absolute lack of depth that he had at his availability. Like, there would be times where I'd go to Walton Hall Park, their former ground, what a place to go. American listeners, you were blessed to not have gone to Walton Hall Park. But you'd see his bench and there'd be like 3 kids on the bench and that's it. And I give Brian Sorensen so much credit because Everton women were never in a relegation scrap, and that is testament to what he was able to do. But at Everton, there is a sense that Brian Sorensen can finally play the way he wants. They can bring this team together. I was at their preseason friendly against Juventus, who are the Italian champions. They've also won the domestic cup over there. Great team. And for the first half, I'd say Everton were all over them. Everton probably could have been 4-0 before halftime. So when they're clicking, they do really well. So I think that's a team to look out for. Aston Villa had one of the worst seasons last season, and no one could figure out why, because if you look at them on paper, an unreal team. And yet it was like... Have you ever seen what's the movie with the basketball players and they get taken over by aliens? Space Jam.
Space
it was
Jam.
like that.
Jam.
Okay, it was like that. Like you were watching these players and you're like, what is wrong with you? Have you been taken over by like extraterrestrial figures? Like what is up? And I think this season that's not going to happen because you could kind of see them get their rhythm towards the end of last season. So I do think Aston Villa is a team to look out for. And Tamerra, I will let you go because I have an idea of who you're going to say.
I mean, I'm still high on the Michele Adjumong train, so I'm going with Brighton. I also watched Madison Haley a lot when she was at Stanford. I know that she's been doing great things with that team as well. I think this is also a team that has slowly, probably more slowly maybe than Everton, been building, been investing. I think they have great guidance. And I think that they're going to do some exciting things this season. Yes, they were 5th. Yes, they were also 15 points behind Man City last season. So that 5th needs to be caveated a bit. But as we've said, the top 4 and sort of everyone else does leave that big gap. So I'm excited to see them continue what looked like a pretty exciting and successful run last season. And I know that the juice that Adjumong's going to be bringing back from the Euros is going to help the team a lot.
Brighton finished 5th in the WSL standings last season. And for our listeners who don't understand why we say things like the top 4, that is because 5th place still puts you 15 points behind Man City, who finished in 4th, just to give you a sense of what kind of the top tier and then the middle tier of the WSL is. Megan, you hit on at the top of the show how relegation will look a little bit different at the end of this season. There will be no automatic relegation from the WSL because the WSL is going to expand to 14 teams in 2026. So there's going to be a new format this season, which will see the last place, 12th place team facing off against the 3rd place team in the WSL 2 in a relegation playoff. Tell me if I'm wrong and tell me who we think that's going to be.
Okay, so in my mind, the last place team in the WSL is going to be Leicester City. Leicester City have just lost Ruby Mace to Everton. I'd say Ruby was one of their most important players. She plays as a defensive midfielder, but sort of makes things tick in the center of the park. If you look at Leicester's recruitment, I think they've brought in, at the time of speaking, 2 players. That's it. One of them is a goalkeeper. There's been a lot of upheaval. Manager is now left. There's question marks over whether or not the manager that is now meant to come in is certainly on a 3-month gardening leave from the club that he was employed at about a month ago. Like it's so dramatic, and this kind of thing doesn't normally happen in the WSL, let alone at Leicester. So I'd say Leicester, if you asked anyone who works in the WSL, I think a lot of people are looking at Leicester and going, oh my gosh, this could be, for what feels like the first time, and I think, Cerys, correct me, is it 2 or 3 years, because I'm blanking when Liverpool came up from the 2nd tier. But for the last 3 years, the team that comes up from the 2nd tier is pretty much automatically down. And it's become a theme.
Yeah, last season it was Crystal Palace, came up, went straight back down. The season before it was Bristol City, went up, came straight back down. So, and just for context, looking at the table from last season as well, so Crystal Palace finished on 10 points. By context, like Chelsea finished on 60 at the top and the team in 11th, so 1 place above Crystal Palace finished on 20. So there has been a massive gap. We haven't really had a relegation battle, which I think, to Tamerra's earlier point about needing someone else to win the league, a competition needs jeopardy. And if we're talking about how we retain fans off the back of the Euros, if you know who's going to win and you know who's going to lose, there's not that much to play for and there's not that much to watch. So I think the fact that hopefully this season, the team that's coming up, London City Lionesses, who I'm sure we'll come on to, owned by Michele Kang, so I know will be a real point of interest for people in the US as well. Like, they are really not going down without a fight. They have brought in a lot of talent, some serious talent, and I can see them, you know, having a proper battle with the likes of Leicester, with the likes of West Ham. I would say Tottenham Hotspur if they hadn't brought in who I think is a very good coach in Martin Ho. But regardless, I think we will see at least 2 or 3 teams kind of scrapping to avoid that last place, which just isn't something that we've seen the last few years. And cruel as it sounds to say, like, I want more teams to be in trouble, I think it'll be really good for the league.
Yeah, because historically what ends up happening is you might have a few teams in trouble, and then in January they bring in 1 or 2 recruitments, and it just blows the team that's come up out of the water, and they can't do anything about it. And like Kara says, it's not fun. It's boring. You get towards the end, and your just eyes are gazed up at the top. You're not looking down at the bottom of the thing. So I think this is going to be really great. And for the Tier 2 as well, WSL 2, this is really fun because there's been a rubberneck of teams trying to come up into the WSL for years. And so now you're going to have 2 automatic places. So that is going to be a really, really fun league to look at. I think it's going to be on YouTube, so you can probably watch it there. But that 3rd place team, there's a very good chance that they can compete with whoever gets relegated from the WSL. So
the last game of the WSL 2 season, the one that the London City Lionesses won that earned them promotion, that was my first time watching a WSL 2 game. And it was giving, for American listeners and WSL followers, it was giving like decision day tension, decision day drama. It helped that the game itself was really, really tight. I know Michele Kang herself was talking about how that was her first taste of the things that supporters go through weekly in terms of the blood pressure, strain, and we need that. I think the women's game needs that. It doesn't matter really what league that we're looking at. But Megan, I was not familiar with all of those details of Leicester's struggles. And at the risk of making just one more NWSL comparison, it does remind me of the Houston Dash, not the current Houston Dash, but maybe like 4+ years ago, just struggling to sign big names, struggling to make major movement, not having the most successful season, save maybe for an end of season push or surprising result. And it's unfortunate. And it actually also reminds me of something that we talked about earlier regarding the big 4 at the top of the table. The way that Manchester United, in relation to the other 3 teams, has not been making those investments, and thus are sort of the point of concern. It definitely sounds like Leicester is at the bottom of the table having sort of a similar experience. And I think this is just where we are now in the women's game, where you are going to be exposed if you don't invest. It doesn't matter how talented your players are. If you're not hiring the right coach, if you're not playing the right system, if you're not taking advantage of these transfer windows, you're going to fall behind. And I do wonder if that's sort of going to be one of the defining factors as we look at the bottom of the table. But I'm also concerned about Leicester.
You use the word invest, Tamerra, and often on this show, we're talking about the need for more investment. Somebody that has made their name in investment is Washington Spirit owner, and you guys touched on it, owner of the now London City Lionesses, Michele Kang. Megan, what has been the buzz and the reaction of this aggressive transfer business that Kang's come in with?
I will never forget Sonia Bombastor's press conference towards the end of last season, where she was asked about London City coming up into the WSL, and she went, yeah, as long as she just takes players from Arsenal and Manchester City and not Chelsea, I'm fine with it. And Sonia's very, very funny. She's a fantastic manager, but it was also sort of a testament to the fact that there is a sense that Kang can take your players, and she has been taking players. She's been getting players from Barcelona. She's been getting players all around the league, players who have had interest from other WSL teams, maybe not from the very top, but definitely from around the league. And they go, oh no, London City want me. I want that. And you don't necessarily always have that with a team that's just been promoted, but there's a huge buzz around Michele Kang. It's around London City. Definitely in boardrooms, that buzz is slightly different to maybe what players are feeling. I've had a few people talk to me about how in boardrooms people will roll their eyes at the idea of Michele Kang, like she's trying to basically upend the topography of this league, the traditional sense of how the status quo works. Michele Kang is a wrecking ball to all of that. And depending on who you are, that's a great thing. Depending on who you are, it's a terrible thing. But Michele Kang is coming in, and she's trying to make sure she comes in with as much energy, as much fever as she can. If anyone saw the London City promotion picture, she was the sun. She was the center of the universe of that promotion. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about Michele Kang this season, whether people like it or not.
Yeah, I hear the word disrupt a lot in relation to London City Lionesses. And generally, I think there's been this strain to not delve too much into like startup language when we're talking about women's soccer, certainly on this side of the pond. But it's also hard to not be curious, at the very least, if not intrigued, if not excited about what's happening with London City Lionesses. And I have to credit, you touched on this already, Megan, the recruitment, because it's one thing to want to disrupt the WSL. It's one thing to want to, earn this promotion. And I know Michele, Kang, and a lot of the London City Lioness players have said, like, we have no intentions of getting relegated in our first season, despite how often we see that happen. But it's another thing to have those two factors and see the roster. So such a major change from last season to this one. So many recognizable names. And I have been especially impressed, honestly, by, like, there are players that maybe are not quite at the peak of their career anymore, but still have plenty of gas in the tank, like Daniela van de Donk, for example. She, I think, combined with her experience across Europe, is going to be huge for this team. She brought over Alana Kennedy and Katie Zellum, who aren't even in the WSL anymore, but obviously have that experience prior to Angel City, where they came from. I'm thinking of the combination of the sort of grit and hunger from the players who carried over from the WSL2 into the WSL, and also the veteran leadership of some of those players I just mentioned. And yes, it's going to take them time to gel, but I think that they, at the risk of using the word, I do see them disrupting some dreams a bit this season, and I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, I think it can only be good for the league to have a team not come up and go straight back down. And I think that London City have recruited really well. The Zellum, Kennedy, that Tamerra's just mentioned, but also Kosovo Asllani, who was already their captain last season, the Sweden national captain as well. Such an important player for them. And yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. My only kind of concern is how they get that all to gel together, because they've made a lot of signings in a pretty short space of time, especially because a lot of the transfer window was sort of disrupted and squidged up by the Euros. It feels a little bit like, you don't want it to turn into a sort of fantasy football team where if you put it on the pitch, it wouldn't actually work. But I'm hoping that that's not what we'll see. I think that they can come into it with a real belief, and it's not, every single team that comes up says we've no intention of getting relegated, but they've actually kind of put their money where their mouth is, to put it in a really cliched, but I guess pretty accurate way.
And just real quick on that too, like when she has put her money where her mouth is, there has been quite a lot of conversation amongst teams down at the bottom about how they're nervous about their investments, and about how I had one person message me, said, "Oh, looks like we're gonna have to have a rocket up our asses." And I mean, they obviously spelled it arses, but it's okay, it's fine. Like I can't really say that, but like that is what she's doing. She is saying, if you do not match me, I'm going to overtake you. And I don't think we've had that in the WSL.
Yeah, that an ownership group that is not trying to spend a ton of money hates to see Michele Kang coming to encapsulate the word disruption. All right, real quick before we wrap up this show, it would not be a preview show without prediction time. In one word, I'm going to come to each of you with who is going to win the WSL season. Megan.
I'm going to say Arsenal.
Yes.
I do. I think so. There you go. One word.
Cerys.
Chelsea.
Tamerra.
I'll keep it really like short and snappy. Just Chelsea.
Arsenal. Standing on business.
Who is your breakout star? And this has to be a player that is in their first WSL season. Cerys.
Iman Bene, I think I'm really excited to see her at Man City. She was so great to watch for Switzerland at the Euros, and she's really versatile as well, so I think she will get a lot of minutes in different kind of positions for City, so very excited to watch her.
Tamerra.
Jade Rose, also with City. I watched her when she was at Harvard. I've watched her with Canada, young center back. Very excited to watch her partner with Alex Greenwood for City, and I think that she is you only need a couple minutes of watching her to know what she offers. So I'm really excited to see her.
Megan, did we steal yours?
Both of
I
mine,
saw a gasp.
actually. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I genuinely...
That's okay. We can agree on this show.
Yeah, no, the two of them I'm honestly so thrilled about. But Rian Ishikawa at Everton, she is a Japanese centre back, and back home she is known as the small one or the little one from her siblings. This girl is huge if you go and watch her for Everton. She's a massive centre back, and she's also one of the funniest human beings that is sort of in the Everton dressing room. Everyone absolutely adores her. But according to people who have watched her, and I've watched her at a preseason friendly, they said that physically she's unmatched in that Everton squad. She's just better than everyone. And I have a lot of high hopes to see her because Everton have brought in three Japanese players, and she's apparently one of the best ones.
I got to see the rest of her family if she's the little one.
Megan Feringa, Cerys Jones, and Tamerra Griffin, I am so thankful to the three of you to get us all set for this WSL season. I feel fully prepared, and I know our listeners do as well. Thank you. And before we get out of here, if you're looking for even more on the state of the WSL, then head over to the Athletic FC podcast. They have a new podcast dropping very soon on the bigger picture of the game. Is it actually growing? What is the impact of the Lionesses Euro victory on the domestic game? And all the latest transfers as well. That's the Athletic FC podcast, available to listen to wherever you get your podcasts. Also, as always, be sure you are subscribed to Full Time wherever you get your podcasts, and go follow the show for all of our extra videos and interview snippets. You can get it at TA Full Time on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And in case you didn't know, The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to provide free best-in-class coverage of women's sports. So go check out the Women's Sports Hub at sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. That link, of course, is in our show notes as well. Thank you so very much to our panel today. I am your host, Jillian Sakovits. And as always, don't forget, Full Time does not happen without our fantastic podcast producer, Theo Lloyd Hughes, our amazing video producer, Leah Griffin, and our esteemed executive producer, Emily Olsen. Enjoy the chaos. We'll see you soon.